Earlier this week, U.S. Rep. Steve Pearce announced he will not seek re-election to Southern New Mexico's Congressional District number 2, and instead will make a bid for governor in the 2018 race. He's the first Republican to declare that candidacy. On the Democratic side, U.S. District 1 Rep. Michelle Lujan Grisham, who declared her candidacy in December, has already been joined by 4 others. Former media exec Jeff Apodaca, he's from Albuquerque, State Senator Joseph Cervantes from Las Cruces, Peter DeBenedictis, an anti-alcohol activist from Santa Fe. In addition to what this means, as the governor's race gains momentum, the entrance of Rep. Pearce leaves 2 New Mexico congressional districts without an incumbent, and an open field for candidates from both major parties to enter the race, of course. Now, with me to discuss this topic and other news of the week are Sophie Martin. She's an attorney and editor of DukeCityFix.com. Laura Sanchez-Rivas, she's an attorney at Cuddy & McCarthy, LLP. Tom Garrity's here from the Garrity Group PR, and Merritt Allen of Vox Optima, LLC. Now, Merritt, starting with you. Mr. Pearce's announcement, it was sort of teased out there for a little bit. Did it surprise you at all?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. And really, if the GOP wants to keep the governor's seat, they need someone who has raised funds at a national level.
And he's certainly done that.
To compete with Lujan Grisham, who's way ahead of everyone in the money game. I'm also interested in Yvette Herrell announcing for that seat. My guess, just because of the relationships, I'm guessing she is the candidate with Pearce's imprimatur. She's not the type to go maverick out, and she has a challenge of trying to get out there as the established candidate before 17 people decide they're going to declare, because you want an unopposed primary, of course, if you can pull it off.
And she has, of course, being a rep from the area, some name ID, certainly from her legislative work.
Absolutely.
So, interesting. Mr. Pearce, what do you think of his chances? He's had a kind of a rough go a little bit ago. Last time he ran for statewide office, didn't work out too well for him. What do you think this time around?
Well, I think he's got the name ID because he ran last time statewide. But yeah, he was able to win the primary against Heather Wilson, who also had good name ID.
That's right.
So I think just given how he performed in the primary the last time, I think he's definitely the front runner, obviously, in this go-round for the governor's race. I think it'll be interesting to see what John Sanchez does. Because he had been talked about at some point. I know he had run for other stuff, so obviously he had some interest in running for something. But I think Pearce is definitely the front runner as far as the primary goes. But I think he's going to have a tough go of it in the general. Obviously, as Merritt mentioned, Michelle Lujan Grisham is the one to catch right now. But you've got some strong candidates also who have jumped in now and are going to make it. They're going to be raising money all over the state and getting their name out there. So I think Pearce has his work cut out for him in the general.
Interesting point there, Tom, that listen, Mr. Pearce is out there. He can raise money, but politics being what it is, that doesn't mean much to other people who just want the seat. There's been rumors of Albuquerque Mayor Richard Berry getting into the game, but Mr. Pearce was quoted in a paper down south saying he's heard from previously mentioned John Sanchez and Mr. Perry that they're not going to run this time around.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and so it should be interesting to see if those conversations actually took place.
That's right.
Because it's always, you always want somebody else speaking for you on major things like whether or not you're going to run for office and stuff. So, which is I was being facetious there, but I'm not a big fan of Representative Pearce going for the governor's seat. Here he is. He's, as far as with the Republican-controlled Congress, he is a senior member. And he has a lot of sway. And we saw what happened when Senator Bingman left. We saw what happened when Senator Domenici left. Well, guess what? We've lost another senior, and whoever fills in at Congressional District 1 or Congressional District 2 is going to either start as the low man on the totem pole, low woman on the totem pole, or the low person on the totem pole, or for the majority party or the minority party. And so I don't see it as a big win for New Mexico. He had a strong seat in a very safe and secure seat in eastern and southern New Mexico, and now that's just gone. And any seniority that we have with the base realignment potentially coming back up, yes, we have Heather Wilson who's there at the Air Force, but you know what? That's just one voice. She doesn't have a vote. And we need votes and we need people. And we need folks who are in the majority. So I'm not a big fan of this. His biggest challenge is that he's going to have to show that he's not an extreme Freedom Caucus extremist. And in a state that is really more middle of the road, as the table is set right now, he is going to need to be a person who is middle of the road. And I don't know if he can do that because of his past positions on a number of things. I hope he can, and I hope that we can have an intelligent discussion as a result.
That's a good point. And Sophie, what Tom also is mentioning is this race is going to coincide with a national race for, of course, midterms, and there could be a sweeping of the tide, so to speak.
So
And
when
he
you do
could be,
this
you know,
and say sweeping of the tide, I think you really need to be doing this.
one side, okay.
Because I don't, for a moment, think that Michelle Lujan Grisham's CD2 is going to go to a Republican.
Okay.
I just CD1. Thank you. I got
That's all right.
court districts. Yeah, I don't think there's any way that that goes to a Republican. That doesn't mean that the Democrats don't have to fight for it. That doesn't mean sit back and do nothing.
Right.
But I think it is too difficult for a Republican in that district. So the discussion then moves to, is there any chance, given that Pierce is no longer in his seat, is there any chance that that goes to the Democrats? That has been a tough fight down there. It'll be interesting to see whether the tough fight comes from, I mean, New Mexicans we like incumbents because we need that
right.
power, as Tom
right.
was saying before. So whether when we sort of throw it up, that gives an opportunity for the Democrats to come in or not remains to be seen. I just want to echo some of what we've heard at the table already. The likelihood of Steve Pierce getting that governor seat, I think, is very low. We've just had 8 years of, or we will have had an 8 years of a Republican governor.
Right.
New Mexicans like to bounce back and forth
Traditionally,
in
that's
that position. It seems like it's time for a Democrat to come into that. Michelle Lujan Grisham, as we've said, is well funded, and you know, she has this history of campaigning in this very important section of the state. I think she can count on support from the northern part of the state. And you know, if we think of it in thirds, Pierce really just has that stronger support down in the south. So I think it's sort of unfortunate. Mr. Pierce is probably the only person who can go up against her in that position, looking at the Republican field, but I'm not sure that he really can get there.
Interesting point there. Laura, pick up on that if you would as well, the tides and how they might be working depending on how things go nationally here over the next year and a half or so. Is he fighting against something that the headwinds might be very, very strong against the Republicans statewide here?
Yeah, I think, like I said, I mean, it's a money race for, you know, unfortunately, we look at the numbers and we look at how much money's been raised to date, and I think he's definitely got, he has to catch, you know, Michelle Lujan Grisham on that front. But I think also in terms of, you know, I think New Mexico is definitely different from the rest of the country in that we went against Trump. You know, we didn't go the same way as the rest of the country did, and I think his connections to the administration could be a factor there. You know, the perception that he's much more conservative could go against him for the general. But I think what's really interesting is, you know, the last time, speaking about CD2, the last time that we had a Democrat down there was Harry Teague, and he got in when Pierce was running for for the Senate race.
Good point.
And so you had this weird vacuum when Domenici left.
And he had plenty of his own dough to make that happen.
He had a lot of his own
That's
dough
right.
to make it happen. That's right.
right.
And that was one, you know, when, I mean, that was a very unusual year, and it was also a presidential year. So you had coattails from a presidential race that helped, I think, get a Democrat elected or Democrats elected across the state. There was so much going on. But once Domenici, you know, decided not to run again, it created a domino effect of everybody jumping into these open CD races. And so I think there's some of that at this point, but there isn't a presidential to really get a whole lot of people to the polls, but there is a gubernatorial race, so that's going to create some coattails. The question is, will there be enough from a Michelle win or any Democrat running to be able to pull more people to the polls in southern New Mexico? And I think that's debatable. I mean, it's been such a solidly red area for a long time. I think there's plenty of people who are thinking about running. What's interesting to me is Joe Cervantes was one of the people who had run before. He'd run, you know, and done a respectable job, I think, in a tough district, and now he's running for governor. So it's interesting to see, you know, that shifted and maybe opened it up for other people to maybe run. So we'll see what happens. But I think, yeah, Steve Pierce has his work cut out for him.
Sure. Let's bring it closer to home in the last couple minutes we have on this one, Merritt, in CD1 here in the Albuquerque area. Our old colleague Janice Arnold-Jones has announced she's running. We've got we've got Michael Hendricks, he's running. He's an immigration lawyer. It's getting crowded. It's just clearly a Democrat plum, CD1. You know what I mean? People just see it for what it is. What do you make of the sheer volume of folks who want this thing?
Well, I know I find that find it very interesting, and I think it's in the Republican primary, Hendricks will have his work cut out for him because Janice Arnold-Jones is an established, well-regarded brand. She's highly intelligent. She's highly insightful. She's highly ethical. She has put herself out there and gotten involved in many issues across party lines, particularly with regard to ethics. And she's had a great forum to let the state know and the district know what's on her mind in this forum. I don't know that the Santa Fe piece is interesting because that's not traditionally Republican, and if you could get any part of Santa Fe, could be interesting. And again, I think what helps Arnold Jones also is that she's very moderate, as was Heather Wilson, and Albuquerque can go that direction as long as you have a moderate candidate.
Right. Interesting, Tom. On the Democrat side, we've got Pat Davis. We've got Deborah Haaland. We've got Damon Martinez, former U.S. attorney, has announced. We've got Damian Lara, Antoinette Cedillo Lopez, who has been at this table quite a number of times for quite a number of years from UNM. All kinds of folks are in there now. I ask again, it's a plum, and people see it for what it is. But we have had plenty of moderate Republicans hold this seat over the years.
Oh, yeah?
And so it's not necessarily a guarantee, is it? It's going to be a tough one.
Congressman Steve Schiff,
That's right.
a classic moderate Republican. I think he set that mold, for the first congressional district.
Followed by
I
Ms.
wouldn't
Heather Wilson, previously mentioned. That's
Exactly.
right.
I don't think it's necessarily it's very, probably a Democrat will win, but I wouldn't say it's something for the Democrats to lose. There's a lot going on, and we're looking at how the landscape is today, as opposed to the landscape a year from now.
Right.
We're still 2 years out from the election, and I don't think that that we're done seeing people jumping into the first or second congressional. It's all going to come down to of course the ground game, and who's going to have that name recognition to get those stragglers who are really going in who haven't made a decision yet.
That's right. I mean, 7 candidates on the Democrat. That's a lot. That's a lot. And that's not even counting, as Tom's mentioning.
It is, and and candidates of sort of varying profiles within varying communities. I think though that for 6 of them, it's an opportunity to get their name out there, as we discussed with other candidates in other parts of the state. And so there's relatively little downside to running. Besides the work and the money and all of that kind of stuff, but it can be an opportunity to sort of launch yourself. And I think the fact that there are 7 also reflects the kind of calculation that people are doing. We don't have a Michelle Lujan Grisham running for that. There's nobody that is sort of the 800-pound gorilla that would keep others out. And I keep waiting to see, is there someone like that who's just going to come in and sort of settle it all out?
Window's closing for that, though, isn't it? Absolutely. When we come back, we have to come. Sorry, Laura. We'll talk about a crackdown on financial record keeping at the UNM Athletic Department.